Hey guys, tonight we're diving into the origins of something truly incredible, the Silk Road. Now, this might sound like an ancient road, full of traders with extravagant silk robes. But it's much more than that. Imagine a sprawling network of paths stretching across Asia, the Middle East, and Europe. These routes weren't just for trading silk, but for the exchange of ideas, goods, and, most importantly, food. Today, we're going to look at how these connections changed global diets forever. It all began in the 2nd century BC, in the heart of ancient China. The Han Dynasty had just come into power, and they were eager to expand their influence beyond their borders. The emperor, looking for ways to connect with the Western world, decided to send an envoy to Central Asia. His mission: to establish a trading route that would link China with the distant Roman Empire. This wasn't just about silk. It was about connecting cultures, and the exchange of goods like spices, grains, and fruits would soon follow. At first, these traders didn't even know what they were getting into. They set off with a few supplies and the hope of finding a market for China's most precious export, silk. Little did they know, they would end up creating a trading route that would change the way the world ate. It wasn't long before other traders, merchants, and adventurers followed, opening up more routes and expanding the network. Let's paint the scene for you. You're walking along a dusty, sun-baked road, surrounded by caravans filled with everything from luxurious silks to the strangest spices and rare fruits you've ever seen. You're not just exchanging goods, you're exchanging recipes, knowledge, and cultural practices. And as you move from one region to another, you're starting to see ingredients that were once impossible to imagine: cinnamon from Sri Lanka, figs from the Mediterranean, and exotic tea leaves from China. So, picture this one moment. You're munching on a simple bowl of rice, and the next, you're tasting a dish spiced with pepper from India, or flavored with garlic from Central Asia. It's as if the entire world of food has just been opened up to you. And the best part, this was just the beginning. The Silk Road didn't just change the trade of goods. It changed how people ate. Foods that were once local became global, and the flavors we take for granted today began to spread across borders. What was once a rare luxury is now a staple in many kitchens. The humble noodle, that traveled all the way from China, eventually becoming the pasta we know and love in Italy. The cinnamon you sprinkle on your morning oatmeal, that once came from the islands of Southeast Asia, carried by traders who journeyed for months on end. But it wasn't just about the spices and fancy ingredients. No, the Silk Road was a melting pot of culinary traditions. In Central Asia, people were cooking with a blend of Persian and Chinese flavors, while in the Mediterranean, the Romans were learning how to spice up their dishes using the same ingredients. Each culture along the route had its own unique twist on food, and this blend of styles made global cuisine richer, more diverse, and way more interesting. By the time the Silk Road reached the distant markets of Europe, people had already started to taste the difference. They were no longer satisfied with bland, simple dishes. They wanted more spices, more variety, more flavors, and the more they tasted, the more they wanted. Soon, the demand for these exotic ingredients reached a fever pitch. Spices were no longer just for the wealthy, they became a part of everyday life. But let's be honest here. There was more going on than just the exchange of food. You see, as food spread, so did the idea of what was considered luxury. A rare fruit like the pomegranate, which once grew only in the Middle East, became a symbol of wealth in places far beyond. The same went for tea, which originated in China. It started as a luxury beverage for the elite, but as it spread across the Silk Road, it became the drink of choice for many. Even today, tea is a cultural staple for so many parts of the world, from the United Kingdom to Japan. And there's more. Did you know that the Silk Road also played a part in shaping what we consider healthy eating today? Along with foods, medical knowledge also traveled the road. Spices like ginger and turmeric, now celebrated for their health benefits, were used by ancient traders not just for flavor, but for their healing properties. Back then, food wasn't just about filling up. It was about staying healthy. As these ancient traders made their way across the Silk Road, they weren't just bringing goods back and forth. They were carrying the very essence of culture, history, and culinary innovation. And before you know it, the world was a little bit smaller, and meals became a little bit more interesting. Alright guys, let's keep the ball rolling as we zoom in on one of the most exciting chapters of the Silk Road.
Spices!
Those tiny little things that we sprinkle on food to bring it to life didn't just come from your spice rack. No, these bad boys have a fascinating journey that began in ancient times. They weren't just seasonings. They were so valuable that they were treated like gold, traded as currency, and even used to make the world's most luxurious dishes. So let's dive into how these flavorful wonders shaped global diets and culture. It all started with one spice that would later become a household name, pepper. Pepper was the spice along the Silk Road, and not just for adding heat. In the ancient world, it was a symbol of wealth and status. Think of it like the first-century version of caviar. Traders were literally carrying bags of pepper across vast distances, crossing deserts, mountains, and dangerous territories. It wasn't easy, but the demand was so high that people were willing to risk it all for that little black peppercorn. But pepper wasn't the only spice making waves. Cinnamon, cloves, and cardamom, all those fragrant spices that make your kitchen smell like a holiday feast, traveled from Southeast Asia to the Middle East and Europe. The journey was long, but these spices weren't just for flavoring. They were believed to have medicinal properties, and that added a whole new layer to their appeal. Imagine that. Every time you use cinnamon in your morning coffee or cardamom in your curry, you're participating in a tradition that goes back thousands of years. Spices were such a big deal that they played a central role in shaping the economies of entire regions. The spice trade became an economic powerhouse, and merchants became incredibly wealthy. In fact, the demand for spices was so high that wars were fought over control of the spice routes. The Venetians, for instance, were absolute kings of the spice trade in the Mediterranean. They controlled the flow of spices from the east and made a fortune off them. It's safe to say that without these spices, global diets would have looked pretty bland. But beyond their value, spices did something else. They introduced a new way of thinking about food. Before the Silk Road, people were eating very simple diets. They had access to grains, fruits, and vegetables, but those ingredients could only go so far. Spices, though, changed the game. They allowed chefs and home cooks to experiment, to combine flavors in new ways, and to create dishes that were more complex and interesting. Think about it, without pepper, there wouldn't be that signature kick in your pasta sauce or chili. Without cinnamon, your apple pie would be a lot less cozy. And as these spices spread, they didn't just alter recipes. They altered cultural practices. In the Mediterranean, for example, the introduction of new spices led to a shift in how people thought about dining. Meals became more elaborate, more flavorful, and more diverse. At the same time, Eastern cultures were learning from the West. Spices weren't just being imported. They were being integrated into existing culinary traditions, leading to the fusion of flavors and techniques that we still see today. So, picture this: you're living in ancient Rome, and your kitchen is stocked with exotic spices. You've got some cardamom for your bread, a little cinnamon for your stews, and of course, pepper for just about everything. This wasn't just a sign of luxury. It was a sign that the world was starting to connect in ways it never had before. The Silk Road wasn't just about trading spices. It was about sharing ideas, cultures, and, of course, food. But let's not forget how the people along the Silk Road were also getting creative with their spices. While the Romans were using pepper and cinnamon, the Persians had their own unique spice blends, which they called advi. These aromatic mixtures included everything from cumin and coriander to saffron and rose petals. The combination of these spices transformed Persian cooking, making it fragrant, flavorful, and irresistibly delicious. Over in India, where spices have been a culinary cornerstone for centuries, the Silk Road helped introduce even more exotic flavors. Turmeric, ginger, and mustard seeds. Ingredients that are now essential in Indian cuisine, spread through the region and mixed with local spices to create dishes with layers of complex flavor. It's amazing to think that these spices traveled such great distances to become integral parts of so many culinary traditions. And then there's the impact on the wider world. As spice trade flourished, countries across Europe, the Middle East, and Asia started looking at food in a whole new light. Suddenly, the notion of luxury was tied not just to precious metals and jewels, but to the flavors and aromas that could make a dish unforgettable. A pinch of saffron could elevate a dish from ordinary to extraordinary. A sprinkle of cardamom could turn a basic dessert into something fit for royalty. But, as with all things precious, spices weren't always easy to come by. They were expensive, and the trade routes could be unpredictable. So, traders had to get creative. Sometimes, the journey to deliver a single bag of pepper could take months, if not years. Imagine trying to transport a perishable ingredient across thousands of miles, through all kinds of terrain, and still have it arrive fresh. It wasn't easy, but the rewards were well worth it. The world was slowly, but surely becoming a much more flavorful place. So, next time you're cooking, remember the little spices you're using. They didn't just appear out of nowhere. They've been on an epic journey across continents, shaping global diets and cultures for centuries. And it all started on the Silk Road. Now that we've spiced things up, let's turn to something just as crucial that flowed along the Silk Road: staple crops. These weren't luxury items, but they changed the lives of everyday people. We're talking about wheat, rice, millet, barley, grains that became the foundation of entire civilizations. And just like spices, these grains didn't stay in one place. Thanks to the Silk Road, they spread across continents, reshaping what people ate for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Let's start with wheat. It was originally cultivated in the Fertile Crescent, but over time, it made its way eastward into Central Asia and eventually China. This wasn't just a trade, it was a revolution. Suddenly, Chinese farmers were working with wheat instead of just millet, and this changed the way food was made. Think about dumplings, noodles, and pancakes. These wheat-based foods wouldn't exist in China without the Silk Road. Meanwhile, rice made the journey in the other direction. Originating in China and Southeast Asia, it traveled westward, eventually reaching the Middle East and parts of Europe. Suddenly, dishes that were once heavy on barley or wheat began to incorporate rice, giving rise to new types of cooking like pilaf and risotto. Rice wasn't just a crop. It was a catalyst for culinary innovation. Then you've got millet, barley, and sorghum, all of which had their own moment in the spotlight. In Central Asia, where the terrain is a mix of arid plains and rugged mountains, these grains became a staple because they were hardy and nutritious. Traders didn't just carry them as goods. They planted them along the way, leaving a trail of agricultural influence. These grains were often turned into porridges, flatbreads, and fermented drinks. Simple, yet deeply nourishing meals that fueled generations of travelers. And here's where it gets even more fascinating. These crops didn't just change diets. They also shaped economies and social structures. Think about it: once you've got a stable food supply, thanks to wheat or rice, you can settle down, build cities, and develop new technologies. That's exactly what started happening along the Silk Road. People weren't just passing through. They were staying, farming, and building communities. With stable communities came culinary traditions. Recipes were passed down, tweaked with each generation, and blended with flavors from other cultures. In the Middle East, for example, rice was seasoned with saffron and cooked with dried fruits, a technique influenced by both Indian and Persian cuisine. In Europe, wheat was turned into crusty breads and hearty pastas. In China, it became chewy noodles and fluffy steamed buns. All of these dishes started with the same basic ingredient: but the way they were prepared told the story of cultural exchange. Now, you might be wondering, how did these grains actually travel? Well, traders didn't just carry sacks of rice or wheat. They brought seeds, and those seeds were planted in new regions, leading to local cultivation. Farmers learned new techniques, and local climates shaped how the crops grew. Some varieties flourished, while others were adapted through crossbreeding. It was a global experiment in agriculture, and the results were delicious. And let's not overlook legumes. Lentils, chickpeas, and mung beans also made their way across the Silk Road, enriching diets with much needed protein. These humble beans were perfect for travelers, lightweight, long-lasting, and easy to cook. Along the route, they were often paired with grains to create complete meals that were both filling and nutritious. From Indian dals to Mediterranean hummus to Central Asian stews, these legume-based dishes told a story of trade, travel, and survival. What's amazing is how this exchange of staple crops continues to impact us today. The food you eat every day, whether it's bread, rice, pasta, or even oatmeal, has a history that stretches back thousands of years and thousands of miles. The Silk Road wasn't just a highway for luxury goods. It was the bloodstream of human civilization, carrying the very sustenance that made societies thrive. So next time you take a bite of your sandwich or stir your rice bowl, remember those ingredients have journeyed across continents, carried by traders, farmers, and adventurers who believed in the power of sharing. The Silk Road might be ancient history, but its flavors live on every single day. As the Silk Road continued to evolve, so did its role as a conduit for more than just food and goods. It became a superhighway for ideas. And when it comes to food, that meant one very important thing: culinary techniques. The Silk Road didn't just bring ingredients from one place to another. It brought methods of cooking, preservation, fermentation, and presentation that would revolutionize how people thought about preparing meals. The impact of this cultural cross-pollination is still seen in today's kitchens all over the world. Let's start with something simple but transformative: noodles. Now, there's been plenty of debate about whether noodles originated in China or Italy. But what's clear is that the Silk Road played a critical role in spreading this delicious innovation. Chinese wheat noodles traveled west, where they were embraced and eventually adapted into the pasta dishes of Italy. The idea of kneading dough, rolling it thin, cutting it into strands, and boiling it in water took hold and was reborn in a new cultural context. The result: lasagna, fettuccine ravioli, the Italian staples we love today. On the flip side, the Italians, and others along the western end of the route, were perfecting cheese-making techniques. These methods, especially in regions like the Middle East and the Caucasus, began to merge with Eastern dairy traditions. This created a dynamic variety of cheeses that traveled along the Silk Road. Think about creamy Persian feta, salty Central Asian kurat, and stretchy Armenian string cheese. These weren't just snacks. They were nutritional powerhouses for travelers who needed protein and fat in compact form. Then you've got fermentation, an ancient and surprisingly global technique. Whether it was fermented vegetables in China, kimchi, and pickles, yogurt in Central Asia, or wine and beer in the Middle East, fermentation served multiple purposes: preserving food, enhancing flavor, and even adding health benefits. Along the Silk Road, travelers and locals alike shared techniques for creating fermented sauces, sardu breads, vinegars, and more. These weren't just useful. They became cornerstones of regional cuisines. One particularly fascinating example is the spread of tea culture. Originating in China, tea drinking became more than just a beverage habit. It turned into a ritual. As the habit of tea drinking moved westward, it was adapted into Persian and Turkish customs. Eventually, tea reached Russia, where it was served in samovars, and later England, where it evolved into the beloved afternoon tea. From a leaf to a lifestyle, tea became one of the Silk Road's most symbolic gifts. Let's also talk about grilling and roasting, techniques that owe their popularity to nomadic tribes of Central Asia. These peoples needed methods that were fast, portable, and simple, and grilling meat over open flame became a culinary hallmark. This method spread like wildfire, pun intended, from Central Asian kebabs to Middle Eastern shawarma, from Turkish kofta to Chinese chon. The concept of skewered, flame, grilled meat took root and flourished. Today's backyard barbecue. It has ancestors along the Silk Road. And it wasn't just fire-based cooking. Steaming was a technique that originated in China, but gradually made its way west. The Chinese perfected the bamboo steamer, which allowed food to cook gently, preserving moisture and nutrients. As the technique traveled, it influenced the development of dumpling-style dishes in many cultures. From momo in Tibet to manti in Turkey. With the travel of ideas came the spread of culinary tools too. Woks, clay ovens, mills and mortar, and pestle sets were shared, modified, and adapted by each culture along the way. For example, the tandoor oven, which started in Central Asia and became integral to Indian and Middle Eastern cuisine, helped introduce the world to naan, tandoori chicken, and other iconic dishes. In this swirl of technique and technology, a new era of fusion cooking began. This wasn't fusion in the modern, foodie sense. It was a natural result of survival curiosity and openness. Traders would learn from local cooks, swap recipes, borrow tools, and adapt what they knew. A Persian cook might add Chinese ginger to a lamb stew. A Turkic merchant might adopt Indian turmeric into a yogurt marinade. Over time, these small changes became embedded in local traditions. What made this fusion so effective was mutual respect. While empires and economies often clashed, food remained a bridge. Sharing a meal became a universal gesture of peace, trust, and hospitality. Along the Silk Road, a bowl of soup could mean more than just sustenance. It could signal an alliance, a friendship, or the start of a new recipe passed down for generations. So, as you master your own kitchen, whether you're boiling pasta, steaming dumplings, or grilling skewers, you're continuing a tradition that's thousands of years old. The Silk Road wasn't just a path for trade. It was the original cooking school of the ancient world, blending flavor with wisdom and seasoning with innovation. Now, as we near the end of our Silk Road journey, it's time to explore one last, fascinating legacy, the symbolism of food. Because food wasn't just sustenance. It carried meaning, status, spirituality, and identity. Along the Silk Road, food told stories about who you were, where you came from, and what you believed in. And in many ways, those meanings still resonate in the way we eat today. Let's begin with luxury and power. On the Silk Road, certain foods were markers of wealth and prestige. If you had access to saffron, for instance, you were probably well connected or wealthy. It took thousands of crocus flowers to make a single ounce. The same went for rare fruits like pomegranates, dates, and figs. To serve them at a banquet was to make a statement. I have the power to reach across the world. In imperial China, the emperor's court used food to show off its sophistication. Delicacies like bird's nest soup or laikis, hauled in fresh by horseback over hundreds of miles, weren't just rare treats, they were political tools. The ability to present such exotic ingredients at royal feasts demonstrated control over vast territories and distant alliances. In the West, Roman elites had their own versions, flamingo tongues, spiced wines, and rare spices, all served with flair to impress guests and assert dominance. But the Silk Road also helped connect food with faith. Many religions developed or adapted dietary laws that shaped what was eaten, when, and how. Buddhism, which spread from India to China and beyond, promoted vegetarianism in some sects, leading to the innovation of meatless dishes using tofu and mushrooms. Islam and Judaism, both prominent along the western ends of the Silk Road, enforced dietary rules, halal and kosher, that guided how animals were slaughtered and meals prepared. These spiritual practices crossed with regional tastes, leading to vibrant traditions like halal Chinese cuisine in Xi'an or kosher lamb dishes in Persian, Jewish communities. Rituals and feasting also became deeply rooted in cultural identity. Think of Nowruz in Persia, with tables filled with symbolic foods like garlic for health, apples ses for beauty, and vinegar sex for patience. Or the Chinese Lunar New Year, where dumplings symbolize wealth and long noodles represent longevity. These celebrations were, and still are, a way of keeping history alive on the dinner plate. Through them, generations remember their roots, share blessings, and express gratitude. Then there's the symbolism of hospitality. Along the Silk Road, where travel could be long, difficult, and dangerous, offering food and drink to strangers was not just polite, it was essential. Nomadic cultures like the Mongols or the Kyrgyz took pride in welcoming guests with milk tea, bread, or stewed meats. In the Middle East, breaking bread with someone was an act of peace and brotherhood. This tradition of hospitality turned food into a social contract. One bite could mean safety, respect, or even a truce. And let's not forget the symbolic role of food in healing. Ancient physicians believed that certain spices and ingredients could balance the body's energies. Ginger was used to warm the stomach, turmeric to cleanse the blood, and mint to cool the system. These beliefs, passed along the Silk Road, laid the foundation for what we now call holistic medicine. Even today, when you drink ginger tea for nausea or eat garlic to boost immunity, you're tapping into ancient food wisdom that crossed continents. In some ways, the greatest symbolism of food on the Silk Road was unity. Despite differences in language, religion, politics, and geography, everyone had to eat. And when you sit down with someone and share a meal, something powerful happens. Walls break down, stories are exchanged, trust is built. The Silk Road may have been lined with market stalls and caravanserais, but its true foundation was shared meals and mutual respect. So, what does this mean for us today? It means that every meal we eat is part of a bigger story. A slice of bread connects you to Mesopotamian farmers. A bowl of noodles links you to Chinese chefs. A cup of spiced chai carries echoes of Indian merchants and Persian poets. We're all inheritors of the Silk Road's legacy, even if we've never set foot on its ancient paths. In closing, the Silk Road wasn't just about moving goods. It was about moving hearts, habits, and hunger. It wove together the world's culinary traditions, introduced us to flavor and fusion, and taught us that food is far more than what's on the plate. It's history, its identity, its connection. So tonight, as you finish your meal, remember you're not just eating. You're continuing a journey that began thousands of years ago. And that, my friends, is the real spice of life. Hey guys, tonight we're diving into the world of ancient Rome. You probably think of grand architecture, bustling markets, and mighty emperors when you think about this famous empire. But hold on to your sandals, because we're about to take a trip to an often overlooked, yet incredibly fascinating part of Roman life: their public toilets. Yes, public toilets. It might sound like an odd place to start, but trust me, the Romans were actually pretty advanced when it came to hygiene, and we're going to explore why they loved their public latrines. Imagine this: it's a hot, bustling day in Rome. You've just finished your shopping in the marketplace, your stomach's grumbling, and you're feeling a little, well, backed up. What do? You don't rush home to your private bathroom. Instead, you head to one of Rome's famous public latrines. Because in this city, there's no shame in using the facilities with your fellow citizens. These toilets were social spaces where people of all classes, yes, even the wealthy, would hang out, chat, and take care of business. In fact, some of these public toilets were so beautifully designed, they felt like small temples to hygiene. But we'll get to that later. So, why were public toilets such a big deal in ancient Rome? Well, Romans took cleanliness seriously, and their communal approach to bathrooms was an extension of their values. Public latrines were a major part of Roman infrastructure, so much so that they were seen as symbols of civic pride. These toilets were ingeniously built with complex plumbing systems that would be impressive even by today's standards, so it's no wonder the Romans felt pretty proud of them. Imagine a Roman engineer giving you a tour of one of these latrines, and pointing to the marble seats, explaining how the flowing water under you kept everything clean. You'd probably be pretty impressed. But what exactly made these public toilets so special? Was it just about convenience, or was there something more? Well, Roman public toilets weren't just places to relieve yourself. They were hubs of social life. No, seriously. These spaces were where Romans caught up with their friends, exchanged gossip, and even did business. Picture it: you walk into a latrine, find a spot on one of the long benches, and start chatting with your neighbor. Maybe you talk about politics, the latest gladiatorial games, or even your plans for the evening. In some ways, public toilets were like ancient Roman versions of today's coffee shops, just with a lot more ventilation. You might be wondering, okay, but why didn't they just build private toilets in their homes? Well, many Romans, especially in the crowded city of Rome, didn't have the luxury of private bathrooms. So, public latrines became a necessity. It's kind of like how today, people in big cities rely on public restrooms in parks or malls. But what set Roman toilets apart was the level of sophistication involved. These weren't just holes in the ground. These were well-designed, multi-seat affairs with running water, making them more like modern-day restrooms than you'd expect from ancient times. The Romans weren't the only ones who had public toilets, of course, but they took things to a whole new level. Many ancient civilizations used basic latrines, but the Romans went all out, making them an essential part of their urban planning. In fact, the concept of public toilets in Rome was intertwined with their commitment to public health, sanitation, and engineering marvels. Public latrines were part of a larger system that also included sewer systems, aqueducts, and bathhouses. Rome's approach to hygiene and infrastructure was way ahead of its time. Now, you might be wondering, what did they actually sit on in these public toilets? Well, forget about the cushy, private bathroom experiences we're used to today. Roman latrines were made of stone or marble, and the seats were long benches with strategically placed holes. No privacy, just a row of people sitting side by side, each taking care of business. There was no awkwardness, just a matter of getting things done and moving on with your day. In fact, Romans didn't even have toilet paper. Instead, they used a tool called a tessorium, a sponge on a stick that they'd rinse off in a trough of water. It may sound odd, but in the context of ancient hygiene practices, it worked for them. These latrines weren't just practical, though. Many were located in grand public spaces, like bathhouses or forums, making them accessible to the people. And some of them were even decorated with marble, mosaics, and intricate tile work, proof that the Romans considered cleanliness not just a necessity, but an art form. Can you imagine sitting on a marble bench, chatting with your friends, while the cool breeze blows through the open air structure? The Romans' love for public toilets wasn't just about function. It was also about community. These shared spaces created a sense of equality, where even the poorest Roman citizens had access to a place to relieve themselves. You could be a wealthy patrician or a humble plebeian, but in the latrine, you were all on equal footing. It was a symbol of Rome's commitment to the collective good, and the idea that everyone, no matter their class, deserved basic hygiene and comfort. You might be thinking, okay, this is all fascinating, but why does any of this matter? Well, here's the kicker. Roman public toilets were not only a sign of Roman engineering genius and their approach to hygiene, but they also played a huge role in shaping how we think about public spaces today. The legacy of Roman toilets lives on in modern public restrooms, and their commitment to hygiene influenced public health policies for centuries. So, every time you step into a clean, functional public restroom, you're indirectly tipping your hat to the Romans. So, next time you use a public toilet, take a moment to think back to ancient Rome. The next chapter will dive deeper into why these toilets weren't just about business. They were a symbol of Roman civilization, reflecting everything from their public health strategies to their sense of community. All right, Now that we've dipped our toes into the world of Roman toilets, let's get into the nitty-gritty of why the Romans loved their public latrines so much. I mean, it's not every day that we look back in history and think, hey, those ancient Romans knew how to make a bathroom experience enjoyable. But trust me, they really did. So, let's start with the first big question: why public toilets? Why not just stick to the old-fashioned, private method of doing business in the privacy of your own home? Well, here's the thing: in ancient Rome, not everyone had a private bathroom. As the city grew, so did the population. And with a population of over 1 million people at its peak, you can imagine how difficult it would be to have enough private toilets for everyone. Plus, Rome was a city built on public spaces. The Romans valued community and shared experiences, whether it was in the grand forums, bathhouses, or, yes, the public toilets. Picture this: you've just finished shopping at the bustling marketplace, and your stomach's starting to rumble. You know it's time to answer the call of nature. But the idea of going all the way back to your tiny apartment with no running water doesn't sound that appealing. So, what do? You head over to one of the many public latrines scattered throughout the city. These weren't just some random stalls in a dark corner. They were part of the city's vibrant social fabric, usually located near other public spaces like markets or bathhouses. They were convenient, accessible, and a natural part of your daily routine. What made these latrines especially appealing, though, wasn't just their location. It was how well they were built. Forget about the old wooden planks you might expect. These toilets were often made of sleek, durable materials like marble, and they were part of Rome's famous public infrastructure. The Romans had a thing for engineering marvels, and their toilets were no exception. The benches were long, often with several seats lined up side by side, and under each hole was a cleverly designed water channel that kept things moving and flowing. The Romans didn't just stop at basic functionality. They made sure the experience was as pleasant as it could be. But let's not forget, the real charm of Roman public toilets wasn't just the engineering, though that was impressive enough, or the convenience. It was how these spaces brought people together. We like to think of public restrooms as solitary, awkward experiences today, but for the Romans, it was a social event. That's right. Using the toilet wasn't a private affair. It was a chance to catch up with friends, exchange gossip, and maybe even strike a business deal. Imagine sitting on a marble bench next to your neighbor, casually chatting about the latest gladiatorial games, or the state of the empire, while taking care of business. It's a pretty wild concept to wrap your head around, right? One of the reasons public toilets became such a social space was because the Romans didn't shy away from their bodily functions. In Roman society, bodily needs were considered a natural part of life, not something to be ashamed of. This mentality extended to public latrines, which were built for comfort and efficiency, with smooth stone seats and flowing water beneath them. The absence of privacy didn't feel weird, it was just part of the culture. You weren't expected to hide your needs behind closed doors. Instead, it was something everyone did, and they did it together. It was just another part of Roman life, like grabbing a bite to eat or meeting friends at the baths. Now, you're probably thinking, okay, but wasn't it a little awkward with no privacy? And yes, I'm sure there were some moments where it might have been uncomfortable, but the Romans took communal life so seriously that the lack of privacy didn't bother them the way it might bother us today. There was no shame in sharing a space for something as basic as relieving yourself. And in some ways, this attitude toward privacy set the tone for how Romans viewed other communal activities, from bathing to dining. Another thing that made these public toilets stand out was their cleanliness. The Romans were ahead of their time when it came to hygiene, while other ancient civilizations were still figuring out ways to deal with waste. The Romans had already mastered the art of water flow. The latrines were built with a constant stream of water running underneath, which helped wash away waste and keep the space cleaner. This wasn't just about making things comfortable for the users. It was also about public health. The Romans understood the importance of sanitation, and their latrines were designed to help prevent the spread of disease. Imagine a city where waste wasn't just left to fester in the streets. Thanks to the Romans, that was a thing of the past. Now, let's get into the practical side of things. What did Romans use to clean up after themselves? Well, forget about the modern conveniences we enjoy today. The Romans didn't have toilet paper. Instead, they used a tool called a tussorium, basically a sponge on a stick. This sponge was kept in a bucket of water or vinegar, and after use, it was rinsed off and placed back in the communal bucket. Not exactly the hygiene standard we're used to, but it worked for the Romans, and it was better than what most other ancient civilizations had. So, why were the Romans so obsessed with their public toilets? It wasn't just about convenience. It was about creating a society that valued public health, community, and hygiene. They wanted to ensure that everyone, regardless of class, had access to basic sanitation. And let's face it, those public latrines were pretty advanced for their time. They weren't just toilets. They were a symbol of Rome's commitment to engineering, public spaces, and, of course, a little socializing. In the next chapter, we'll take a deeper dive into the design and layout of Roman public latrines. You'll be surprised by just how advanced they really were, and why the Romans took so much pride in their bathroom spaces. Spoiler alert. It's not just about the water systems. There's a lot more to these places than you might think. Alright, now that you've got a feel for the social and practical side of Roman public toilets, let's take a closer look at the actual design and layout. You might think of public toilets as a basic concept, just a place to go when nature calls. But trust me, the Romans took their toilet design to a whole new level. These weren't just functional. They were also examples of Roman engineering genius, and they were integrated into the city's grand infrastructure. Imagine walking into one of these ancient public latrines. You enter a spacious room with marble walls and intricate tilework, the kind of craftsmanship that's still awe-inspiring today. The first thing you'll notice is the benches. Long, stone seats with neatly spaced holes. No individual stalls or privacy, of course. It's just you and everyone else, side by side, sitting on these communal benches. But despite the lack of privacy, the whole space was surprisingly comfortable. Well, as comfortable as a public toilet can be. One of the reasons the Romans could pull this off was because they built these latrines to be incredibly functional. Underneath each hole, there was a channel of running water, kind of like an ancient version of modern plumbing. This wasn't just a little trickle. The water flowed constantly, which helped carry away waste and keep things relatively clean. Imagine sitting down, and the sound of the water running beneath you was a reminder that the Romans knew how to take care of business, both literally and figuratively. The clever engineering didn't stop there. Romans were obsessed with efficiency, so these public toilets were built with the flow of waste in mind. Waste was carried away not just by water under the seats, but also by carefully planned sewage systems. These latrines were connected to a larger network of sewer systems that funneled waste out of the city and into the Tiber River, keeping the streets of Rome cleaner than in many other ancient civilizations. No more walking through piles of trash or dodging human waste on the streets, like in some other parts of the world at the time. And while the function of these toilets was top-notch, the Romans didn't forget about the aesthetic. The latrines were often placed near public spaces like bathhouses, markets, and forums, places that were designed to be social hubs. So, not only were these toilets practical, they were also part of the grand Roman architectural design. Some latrines had mosaic floors, painted walls, and marble seats, making them feel more like a spa than a restroom. It's almost like they were saying, "We care about your comfort, even when you're, well, taking care of business." The real secret to these public latrines, though, wasn't just in their engineering or decoration. It was in how they fit into Roman social life. Public toilets were more than just places to go when you had to relieve yourself. They were social spaces. Picture a group of Romans sitting on a bench together, chatting about the latest political gossip, discussing the upcoming gladiator games, or even debating philosophical ideas. These toilets weren't just about doing your business. They were about engaging in the daily rhythms of Roman life. They were places to connect, to relax, and to share the experience of being a part of the larger Roman community. The Romans loved their public toilets for many reasons, but one of the biggest reasons was how they helped create a sense of equality. Whether you were a wealthy patrician or a lowly plebeian, you were all sitting side by side on the same benches, using the same water system. Everyone had access to basic hygiene, and this reflected the Roman ideal of a shared public life. Public toilets weren't just practical. They were a symbol of the Romans' commitment to the collective good, a way of showing that the health and well-being of all Roman citizens mattered. Now, let's take a moment to appreciate the innovation of these toilets in comparison to other civilizations of the time. The Roman Empire, for all its grandeur and might, was also deeply concerned with the practical aspects of life. Public health, sanitation, and infrastructure were just as important as grand battles and imperial conquests. While other ancient civilizations might have built great monuments or temples, the Romans took just as much pride in their ability to keep their cities clean and organized. Their public toilets, along with their advanced sewage and water systems, were a testament to this ingenuity. It wasn't just about creating the best toilet either. It was about making sure everyone had access to it. In many ancient civilizations, only the elite had access to private bathrooms, while the poor had to make do with unsanitary public spaces or worse, no toilets at all. The Romans, on the other hand, made sure that public toilets were available to everyone, from the lowest class to the emperor himself. These toilets weren't just functional, they were a symbol of the inclusivity and organization of Roman society. But let's be honest, despite all the ingenuity and social benefits of these public latrines, there were some drawbacks. For one thing, privacy was pretty much non-existent. There's something inherently odd about sitting next to a stranger while, well, doing your business. But the Romans didn't mind. They were used to public life, and this lack of privacy was just another part of their communal culture. It was a little like today's crowded public restrooms, where you might end up next to someone you don't know. Except back then, it was all part of the Roman experience. And of course, let's not forget the lack of modern toilet paper. Instead of TP, the Romans used a tussorium, a sponge on a stick. After using it, they'd rinse it off in a communal bucket of water or vinegar. It may sound gross by today's standards, but for the Romans, it worked just fine. This system was pretty efficient for the time, and it was part of their innovative approach to hygiene. So, in the next chapter, we're going to dive into the fascinating cultural side of Roman public toilets. What role did they play in Roman society, beyond being just functional spaces? Why did the Romans love them so much, and how did they reflect Roman values? We'll explore that next, and trust me, there's more to these public latrines than you might think. Let's take a step back for a moment and think about the broader role that Roman public toilets played in the culture and society of ancient Rome. While they were undeniably a practical part of daily life, they also had a symbolic significance that reflected Roman values and their view of hygiene, public space, and communal life. One of the most important aspects of Roman public toilets was their deep connection to the concept of public health. Unlike many other ancient societies that neglected hygiene, the Romans took cleanliness seriously. Public toilets were not just about providing a place to relieve oneself, they were also about maintaining the health and well-being of the population. They understood that keeping waste out of the streets and away from people's living spaces was crucial for preventing disease and ensuring a clean, livable environment. This focus on public health wasn't just limited to toilets. It extended to other areas of Roman urban life as well. The Romans were pioneers in creating comprehensive sewage systems, public baths, and aqueducts that delivered fresh water to the city. These innovations not only made life more comfortable for Romans, but also helped protect them from disease outbreaks that were common in other ancient civilizations. It's not a coincidence that the Roman Empire was one of the most enduring empires in history. Part of their success lay in their commitment to infrastructure and public health, which played a key role in sustaining a large and growing population. But Roman public toilets weren't just about hygiene. They also had a social function. As we discussed earlier, these toilets were communal spaces where people gathered, chatted, and interacted with one another. Imagine walking into a large, bustling public latrine, hearing the sound of water flowing, and seeing people from all walks of life seated next to one another, exchanging news and gossip. This was a daily social ritual that connected people in a way we might find unusual today. In a society where public life was highly valued, the communal nature of Roman latrines reflected the Roman ideal of civitas, the idea of being part of a larger community. The Romans saw themselves as citizens of the empire, bound together by shared experiences, civic duties, and public spaces. Whether it was in the grand forums, the bustling markets, or the busy public toilets, being part of the community was essential to Roman identity. This sense of communal responsibility extended to the way the Romans organized their public latrines. The toilets were usually located in highly trafficked areas like bathhouses, marketplaces, and near government buildings, making them accessible to the largest number of people. It wasn't about luxury or exclusivity. It was about ensuring that everyone had access to the same level of sanitation and public services. The message was clear in Rome. Everyone, regardless of status, had a right to basic public amenities. Another cultural element to consider is the role of Roman public toilets in the rituals of everyday life. Using the latrine wasn't just a biological necessity. It was also part of the Roman rhythm of life. Romans didn't view these spaces with the same sense of discomfort or embarrassment that we might associate with public restrooms today. Instead, they were integrated into the broader context of Roman social and religious rituals. For example, many of the public latrines were located near religious temples or other sacred sites. Some Romans believed that certain rituals and prayers performed in these places could purify the body and soul, making public toilets part of that process. There was even a connection between the maintenance of public sanitation and the state's responsibility to ensure the well-being of the people, a responsibility often tied to the gods' favor. The notion of cleanliness and purification was deeply intertwined with Roman religion, and this extended to their public bathrooms. Interestingly, Roman toilets were often lavishly decorated, especially in the higher class areas or in the public baths. Mosaics, marble, and intricate tilework adorned the walls, and these latrines were viewed as part of the larger architectural splendor that characterized Roman public spaces. While many people might have simply seen them as places to relieve themselves, for the Romans, these spaces were a reflection of their culture's appreciation for both beauty and function. So, what does this tell us about Roman values? It shows that the Romans saw hygiene and public health not as isolated issues, but as part of the whole of life, something that was integral to their sense of citizenship and social responsibility. These latrines were a civic good, a necessary part of maintaining a clean and functioning society, but they also reflected a broader Roman worldview that prized communal experiences, efficiency, and the idea of being part of something larger than oneself. In fact, the popularity of public toilets and the way they were woven into daily life is one of the reasons Roman society was able to thrive for so long. While the public latrines themselves were a reflection of Roman innovation, they also embodied the core values of the empire: pragmatism, social cohesion, and respect for the collective good. Despite the advanced sanitation systems, however, It's worth noting that not all Romans were thrilled with the idea of sharing a toilet with others. There were, of course, some who preferred the privacy of their homes, but the Roman attitude toward public spaces, in general, was one of inclusivity. Whether you were wealthy or poor, the Roman city was designed to be an open and accessible space for all citizens. The fact that public toilets played such a large role in daily life speaks to the egalitarian ideals that the Roman Empire sought to uphold, at least in terms of public services. In conclusion, Roman public toilets were far more than just places to relieve oneself. They were an integral part of Roman life and culture, reflecting the empire's commitment to hygiene, public health, and communal life. These toilets were not only functional, they were a symbol of Roman innovation, social interaction, and shared public responsibility. In a world where privacy was often sacrificed for the sake of community, these public latrines were a testament to the Romans' belief in the importance of the collective good. In the next chapter, we'll take a look at some of the legacy of Roman public toilets and how they influenced the development of sanitation systems in later civilizations. We'll also explore how the Roman approach to public hygiene set the stage for the modern world in ways that are still evident today. As we wrap up our exploration of Roman public toilets, let's take a step forward and consider the legacy these ingenious structures left behind. While the Roman Empire eventually fell, their advancements in public sanitation lived on, shaping the way future civilizations approached hygiene and public health. Roman toilets were not just an isolated innovation of their time. They were part of a larger infrastructure system that included roads, aqueducts, and public baths, all of which helped Rome become one of the most well-organized and enduring empires in history. The Romans' commitment to public health was groundbreaking, and in many ways, it laid the foundation for modern sanitation systems. To understand the legacy of Roman toilets, let's first look at the impact they had on the development of later sewage systems. After the fall of the Roman Empire, Europe entered the so-called Dark Ages, a time when many of the advancements made during Roman times were lost or forgotten. Sanitation practices regressed, and cities became overcrowded with little regard for hygiene or public health. As a result, disease spread quickly, and the lack of proper waste management contributed to the suffering of millions. However, the lessons of Roman engineering weren't completely lost. Over time, people began to realize the importance of sanitation once again. The first steps toward modern sewer systems can be traced back to the Middle Ages, when cities in Europe began to construct rudimentary systems to carry waste away from populated areas. These early systems, though basic compared to Roman standards, were inspired by the Roman emphasis on plumbing and water flow. Much like the Romans, these systems were designed to remove waste from the streets and reduce the spread of disease. It wasn't until the Renaissance that the knowledge of Roman sanitation systems started to resurface. Scholars and engineers began to study ancient Roman texts and ruins, and many of them took inspiration from the advanced sewage systems the Romans had built. In particular, the work of Renaissance engineers, such as Leonardo da Vinci and later, during the Industrial Revolution, sparked a renewed interest in public health and sanitation. Engineers began to experiment with ways to improve waste management and hygiene in burgeoning urban centers. In the 19th century, as cities in Europe and America grew rapidly, the need for proper sanitation became even more pressing. The Industrial Revolution brought about overcrowding and industrial pollution, creating conditions that led to the spread of diseases like cholera and typhoid fever. It was during this period that modern sewage systems were developed, modeled after Roman innovations, and put into use in cities around the world. The first modern sewers, along with the introduction of clean drinking water, helped drastically improve public health and were instrumental in reducing the spread of disease. One of the most significant milestones in the legacy of Roman toilets came with the development of the modern flush toilet. Though not directly descended from Roman latrines, the flush toilet drew inspiration from Roman engineering principles, particularly their use of water flow to manage waste. The flush toilet was invented in the 16th century, with the most famous early version being developed by Sir John Harrington, an English courtier and godson of Queen Elizabeth I. His design was a far cry from Roman latrines, but it was still built on the principle of using water to remove waste from a chamber and into a sewer system. By the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the flush toilet became widespread thanks to the rapid expansion of urban infrastructure and a growing understanding of the link between sanitation and public health. These modern toilets, which use water to flush waste into a sewer system, owe much to the principles pioneered by the Romans in their public latrines. The Roman commitment to creating functional, efficient systems for waste management helped shape the course of sanitation technology, leading to the modern bathrooms and toilets we use today. In fact, the influence of Roman sanitation can still be seen in the architecture of modern plumbing systems. The concept of connecting toilets to a central sewer system, the use of running water to keep waste moving, and even the layout of modern plumbing all have roots in Roman engineering. While we've come a long way from the sponges on a stick, the foundation for modern sanitation was built by the Romans, and their innovations continue to shape the way we think about public health. Of course, Roman toilets weren't perfect, and there were many aspects of Roman sanitation that we'd consider outdated or unsanitary by today's standards. The lack of privacy in public latrines, for example, would be unthinkable in most societies today. But even with these drawbacks, Roman public toilets were a testament to the Romans' ability to blend functionality with social responsibility. They understood the importance of creating public spaces that were not only efficient, but also contributed to the health and well-being of the entire community. The Romans also took hygiene seriously in other aspects of their daily life, particularly when it came to bathing. Public bathhouses were common throughout the empire, and they were often connected to toilet facilities. Bathing was not only a hygienic activity, but also a social one, where people could relax, socialize, and discuss everything from politics to philosophy. The bathhouses were another reflection of the Roman approach to public life and health. Roman toilets, with their intricate engineering and social function, continue to be a symbol of Roman innovation and their ability to blend practicality with community values. The fact that these public toilets were both functional and integrated into the social fabric of Roman life speaks to the Roman commitment to creating a society where everyone had access to basic public services, regardless of social status. As we've seen, the legacy of Roman toilets goes beyond just their functional design. They were part of a larger vision of public health, social equality, and urban planning. The innovations of the Roman Empire continue to influence our lives today, especially in how we think about sanitation, plumbing, and the infrastructure that makes modern cities livable. In the next chapter, we'll explore how Roman baths also contributed to the empire's approach to public health and social life, further showcasing the Romans' unique approach to blending hygiene, leisure, and community in their daily lives. Now that we've explored the legacy of Roman toilets, let's shift our focus a bit and look at another crucial aspect of Roman hygiene and public life, the public bathhouses, or therma. These grand structures were far more than just places to clean up. They were vital hubs of social interaction, relaxation, and even business. In many ways, Roman baths were as much a part of daily life as the public toilets we've discussed. Bathhouses were spread all over the Roman Empire, and they became a staple of Roman cities. Whether you lived in a bustling metropolis, like Rome itself, or a smaller provincial town, you could always find a bathhouse nearby. These bathhouses weren't just for the elite. They were open to all citizens, from the poorest plebeian to the wealthiest senator. Like the public latrines, Roman baths were a public good, ensuring that hygiene and relaxation were accessible to all. The design of a typical Roman bathhouse was impressive, reflecting the Romans' engineering prowess. A standard bathhouse consisted of a series of interconnected rooms with different temperatures, each serving a specific purpose in the bathing process. The first room you'd enter was the apoditerium, or changing room. Here, bathers would leave their clothes in the care of attendants and prepare for the experience ahead. This room was often decorated with beautiful mosaics and statues, setting the tone for the luxurious experience that awaited. Next, bathers would move into the tepidarium, a warm room designed to relax the body and prepare it for more intense heat. The tepidarium wasn't as hot as the other rooms, but it was warm enough to help you sweat out any impurities. This room had heated floors, which were part of the Romans' famous hypocaust system, an early form of underfloor heating that provided warmth to the bathhouse without relying on a traditional fireplace. From there, bathers would move into the caldarium, the hot room. This was the heart of the bathhouse, where bathers would immerse themselves in hot water, often in large, steamy pools. The temperature in the caldarium could get quite intense, with the steam rising from the water and enveloping the bathers in warmth. Here, people would sit and relax, chatting with friends, discussing politics, or even conducting business. The caldarium was the ultimate place to unwind and socialize, much like a modern-day spa or health club. Finally, after soaking in the caldarium, bathers would move into the frigidarium, a cold room or cold plunge pool. The sudden transition from hot to cold water was believed to stimulate the body and invigorate the mind. The Romans believed that this alternating between hot and cold water helped improve circulation, cleanse the skin, and refresh the body. This practice is not too dissimilar from modern hydrotherapy techniques used in spas today. Roman bathhouses weren't just about hygiene. They were central to Roman social life. People would go to the baths not only to clean themselves, but to engage with their community. The bathhouses were places where people met, relaxed, and interacted in ways that were impossible to replicate in their private homes. Here, social status mattered less. It was a place where Romans, regardless of their wealth or rank, could come together as equals. You might sit next to a senator one moment and a merchant the next, and the conversations that took place in the baths often ranged from mundane gossip to serious political discussions. These bathhouses were also places of luxury and leisure. The wealthiest bathhouses, like the famous baths of Caracalla in Rome, were immense structures with beautiful mosaics, sculptures, and gardens. Some even had libraries, shops, and gyms. Visitors could not only bathe but also take in cultural performances, enjoy a massage, or participate in athletic competitions. The Roman bathhouse was, in many ways, a precursor to modern recreational centers and health clubs. But the baths weren't just about leisure. They were also places of ritual. Bathing, for the Romans, had a spiritual aspect as well. Bathers would often make offerings to the gods before entering the water, and the entire experience was seen as a way to purify the body and soul. The act of bathing in the warm waters was considered a form of lustratio, a purification ritual, and it was part of a broader Roman belief in the importance of cleanliness and hygiene, not only for physical health, but also for moral and spiritual well-being. While the public latrines and bathhouses were integral parts of Roman daily life, they also reflected a broader cultural value, the Romans' belief in the importance of balance. Bathing was not only about cleanliness, it was about creating harmony between the body and the mind, between work and relaxation, between the individual and the community. It's no surprise that Romans devoted so much time and effort to building grand bathhouses. These spaces were designed not just for utility, but for pleasure, socializing, and community bonding. They played a central role in the Roman concept of leisure and relaxation, giving rise to an ideal of balance that would resonate through future civilizations. The influence of Roman bathhouses can still be seen today. Many modern spas and health clubs use principles that date back to Roman times, from the hot and cold water treatments to the emphasis on relaxation and socializing. The idea of a space where people can come together to unwind, share ideas, and enjoy each other's company is just as relevant now as it was in ancient Rome. So, as we close our chapter on Roman baths, we can see that they were not just about cleaning the body. They were about fostering a sense of community, promoting well-being, and creating a space for Romans to connect with one another in ways that were uniquely Roman. Whether it was in the public latrines or the grand bathhouses, hygiene and social life were intricately linked in Roman society, and their legacy continues to influence the way we think about public health and communal spaces today. In our next chapter, we'll explore the influence of Roman innovations in sanitation and public health beyond the empire. How did the Roman approach to hygiene affect other cultures? And what lessons can we still learn from their methods today? Let's dive into the lasting impact of Roman sanitation on the world. As we shift our focus to the broader impact of Roman sanitation and public health beyond the empire, we need to recognize just how influential Roman innovations were. The Romans' advancements in hygiene, public health, and infrastructure didn't just benefit their own society. They set the stage for improvements in sanitation that would resonate through centuries and reach far beyond the borders of the Roman Empire. When the Roman Empire fell, much of the knowledge and technological progress from the ancient world was lost or forgotten. However, many of the sanitation practices and innovations introduced by the Romans would eventually be revived and rediscovered, shaping the development of public health systems in the centuries that followed. In the medieval period, after the collapse of the Roman Empire, much of the Roman emphasis on sanitation and public hygiene was abandoned. Public baths were closed, the use of sewage systems declined, and cities began to grow without any clear organization around waste management. As a result, hygiene standards significantly decreased, leading to recurring outbreaks of diseases like cholera and the plague. Without proper sanitation, waste accumulated in the streets, and the lack of clean water led to widespread disease. The population of Europe suffered immensely, and many cities became overcrowded with no public health infrastructure to mitigate the spread of illnesses. However, despite these setbacks, the seeds of Roman sanitation practices were never entirely forgotten. Roman aqueducts, sewers, and even their methods of waste removal were studied during the Renaissance, a period when interest in ancient knowledge began to revive. Scholars and engineers rediscovered the significance of proper sewage and water management, inspired by Roman models, and began to see the connection between clean water, waste removal, and public health. The Renaissance period saw the first major steps back toward improving sanitation. Italian cities like Florence and Venice, which had been influenced by Roman engineering during their peak, started developing new water management systems, bringing back concepts like aqueducts and citywide waste removal systems. While not yet as advanced as the Romans, these early systems were essential in reducing disease and improving hygiene for growing urban populations. Cities began to incorporate better sewage management, and public baths, which had been largely abandoned, started to make a slow comeback, though they weren't as grand or widespread as in Roman times. It wasn't until the Industrial Revolution that the real transformation took place. As cities grew exponentially in the 18th and 19th centuries, sanitation issues became even more pressing. The rapid urbanization of the time created a perfect storm of overcrowding, unsanitary living conditions, and frequent disease outbreaks. The cholera epidemics of the 19th century were a wake-up call that reinforced the necessity of modernizing sanitation systems. During this period, engineers and scientists, drawing heavily on Roman methods of waste management and water flow, developed the first comprehensive sewage systems. One of the key figures in this movement was the English civil engineer, Sir Joseph Baljet, who is widely credited with designing London's vast and efficient sewer system in the mid-19th century. His design incorporated elements of Roman engineering, including the use of underground pipes and gravity, to carry waste away from the city. Bazalgette's work dramatically improved public health in London, helping to end the cholera outbreaks that had plagued the city for decades. His efforts helped to modernize sanitation on a global scale, and his approach became a model for other cities around the world. Bazalgette's sewer system in London was just the beginning. As the importance of sanitation became more widely recognized, cities all over the world began to implement similar systems. The idea of removing waste from the streets and providing clean drinking water was central to these new public health initiatives, and many of the systems that were built during this time owe much to Roman engineering principles. The Romans were the first to realize that proper sewage systems were key to maintaining a healthy and thriving city, and this idea became one of the cornerstones of modern urban planning. The legacy of Roman sanitation can also be seen in the development of modern plumbing systems. The flush toilet, which had evolved over the centuries, became a staple of modern homes in the 19th and 20th centuries. The widespread adoption of plumbing systems in homes and public buildings was a direct response to the problems faced by growing urban populations and the need to separate waste from living spaces. The push for clean, running water and proper waste removal became central to the development of public health policies in the 20th century. In many parts of the world, Roman principles of public health are still in use today. Cities in places like the Middle East, North Africa, and Europe continue to use Roman-inspired engineering techniques for managing waste and ensuring clean water. Modern water treatment plants, sewage systems, and public health infrastructure all owe a debt to the innovations pioneered by the Romans. The Roman approach to sanitation was not just about building functional systems, but about creating a framework for healthier, more livable cities that could sustain large populations over time. Roman sanitation also influenced the healthcare sector. Their emphasis on cleanliness, hygiene, and disease prevention laid the groundwork for the understanding that the environment plays a crucial role in public health. Today, doctors and health experts continue to emphasize the importance of sanitation in preventing disease, and much of this knowledge can be traced back to Roman public health practices. Beyond sanitation and hygiene, the Romans also influenced urban planning on a grand scale. Their cities were designed with public infrastructure in mind, including roads, water systems, and waste management. Modern cities today still rely on many of the same principles of urban planning that the Romans pioneered. Clean streets, efficient waste removal, and the integration of public services into urban life are all part of the legacy of Roman urban design. Roman public health principles also made their way into modern public policy. The idea that access to clean water and sanitation is a fundamental right for all citizens was one of the key lessons learned from Roman infrastructure. Today, many governments around the world invest in public health infrastructure, using the same principles developed by the Romans to ensure that all citizens, regardless of social status, have access to basic sanitation and hygiene. In conclusion, while the Roman Empire fell long ago, its innovations in sanitation and public health continue to shape the world we live in today, from their advanced sewage systems and aqueducts to their public bathhouses and commitment to communal hygiene. The Romans laid the foundation for modern public health systems. Their influence can be seen in everything from the plumbing systems in our homes to the policies that govern sanitation in our cities. The Roman legacy in public health is a testament to the importance of infrastructure, hygiene, and the belief that all members of society deserve access to the basic amenities that promote health and well-being. In the next chapter, we'll explore the future of public health and sanitation, examining how modern innovations are building on the Roman legacy and what lessons we can learn as we continue to develop smarter, more sustainable sanitation systems for future generations. As we look toward the future, It's fascinating to see how the innovations pioneered by the Romans continue to inspire modern approaches to sanitation and public health. While technology and urbanization have come a long way since the time of the empire, many of the principles the Romans introduced are still guiding the development of smarter, more sustainable cities today. So, let's dive into how the legacy of Roman sanitation can inform the future of public health and explore how modern innovations are building on those ancient foundations. 1. Sustainable sanitation systems for the future. In today's world, sustainability is one of the biggest challenges facing cities around the globe. The rapid growth of urban populations, coupled with climate change and limited natural resources, has put immense pressure on existing sanitation infrastructure. As we continue to build larger cities, the demand for water and waste management will only increase. This makes it all the more important to develop sustainable systems that can handle these demands without depleting our natural resources or harming the environment. Here, Roman innovations are especially relevant. The Romans were pioneers in water management, creating extensive aqueducts to bring fresh water into cities and well-designed sewage systems to carry waste away. Their focus on water flow, gravity-based systems, and efficient infrastructure laid the groundwork for many of the water and waste management strategies we use today. In fact, the principles of Roman engineering are still applied in modern systems, especially in the design of sustainable urban infrastructure. One of the key aspects of sustainability in modern sanitation is water conservation. Today, many cities are looking at ways to reduce water usage while still maintaining effective waste management systems. Technologies like water-efficient toilets, rainwater harvesting, and grey water recycling are being developed to reduce the strain on freshwater supplies. These innovations are similar to the Roman concept of using water efficiently and effectively to maintain public health. In the future, we may see even more advanced solutions that integrate these principles, ensuring that cities can meet the growing demand for clean water without overburdening the environment. 2. Wastewater treatment and recycling. Another area where Roman sanitation principles are being updated for the modern world is in wastewater treatment and recycling. While the Romans understood the importance of water flow and the removal of waste, the modern challenge lies in treating and reusing wastewater in a way that benefits both the environment and human health. Advanced wastewater treatment technologies, such as membrane filtration and biological nutrient removal, are helping cities clean and recycle wastewater more efficiently. Many modern cities, especially in water-scarce regions, are increasingly relying on recycled wastewater for non-potable uses like irrigation, industrial processes, and even cooling systems. This approach is deeply rooted in the Roman understanding of water systems, ensuring that water moves effectively through urban areas while minimizing waste. Some forward-thinking cities are also exploring closed-loop wastewater systems, where water is continuously recycled and reused within a building or neighborhood. This concept aligns with the Roman approach of using water to carry waste out of cities and prevent contamination, but with an added focus on minimizing waste and reusing resources as much as possible. 3. Smart cities and technology integration. In the 21st century, technology is playing a huge role in reshaping the way we approach urban sanitation. The concept of smart cities is becoming increasingly popular, and it's all about using technology to optimize the flow of resources, reduce waste, and improve the quality of life for urban residents. Roman public health infrastructure was all about making sanitation efficient and accessible, and today we're seeing similar efforts through the integration of sensors, data analytics, and automation in urban sanitation systems. Smart sensors in waste pipes and treatment plants can detect blockages or leaks in real time, preventing problems before they become serious. Data analytics is being used to optimize the flow of water, adjust waste collection schedules based on usage patterns, and predict future demands. These technologies are helping cities run more efficiently, just as the Romans used engineering to create sustainable and effective sanitation systems. Furthermore, smart toilets and waterless sanitation systems are being developed for areas with limited access to water or where traditional sewage systems are not feasible. These technologies can help provide sanitation in remote areas or rapidly growing cities, ensuring that everyone has access to safe and clean waste disposal. 4. Universal access to sanitation. One of the most important lessons we can learn from Roman public health practices is the commitment to universal access to sanitation. In the Roman Empire, public latrines and bathhouses were open to all citizens, regardless of social class, because the Romans understood that hygiene and health were a fundamental part of living in a thriving society. Today, there are still millions of people around the world who lack access to basic sanitation, particularly in developing countries. According to the World Health Organization, billions of people still live without adequate access to clean water and proper sewage systems, which contributes to the spread of preventable diseases. The United Nations Sustainable Development Goal, Phase 6, aims to provide access to clean water and sanitation for all by 2030. Achieving this goal requires innovations in infrastructure, policy, and technology. Drawing from Roman practices, modern cities are focusing on inclusive sanitation solutions that can be scaled to meet the needs of growing populations. For example, affordable sanitation options like communal toilets, mobile toilets, and portable sanitation units are being used in areas without access to traditional sewage systems, just as the Romans designed their latrines to be open to the public. The goal today is to ensure that everyone has access to safe and clean facilities. In addition, governments and NGOs are working to improve sanitation infrastructure in informal settlements, which often lack proper waste disposal systems. By implementing low-cost technologies such as composting toilets and small-scale wastewater treatment plants, these groups are bringing the principles of Roman public sanitation to areas where conventional plumbing is not viable. 5. Public education and hygiene awareness. Roman public health practices also taught us the importance of education and hygiene awareness. The Romans understood that promoting cleanliness and good hygiene was essential to maintaining a healthy population. They regularly engaged in public health campaigns, encouraging people to bathe, maintain personal cleanliness, and take part in communal sanitation activities. In today's world, public health campaigns continue to play a critical role in preventing disease and promoting hygiene. Educational efforts focused on hand washing, safe water use, and waste disposal are essential in fighting diseases in areas where sanitation infrastructure is inadequate. The lessons learned from the Romans about the importance of public hygiene are still being applied today, especially in efforts to combat diseases like cholera, malaria, and diarrhea. Conclusion: building on Roman foundations. Looking at the future of sanitation, it's clear that Roman innovations continue to influence modern systems of public health and urban planning. From the early sewer systems and aqueducts to the modern smart cities and wastewater recycling systems, we are still building on the foundations laid by the Romans centuries ago. Their emphasis on cleanliness, water management, and public health has shaped the way we approach urban infrastructure today and will continue to influence how we build sustainable, healthy cities in the future. In the next chapter, we'll examine how cultural shifts and advancements in sustainability are leading to new models of urban living that prioritize health, social equity, and environmental responsibility, principles that the Romans would undoubtedly recognize. As we look toward the future of urban living, we can draw a significant parallel to the Roman Empire's approach to public health and infrastructure. The Romans built their cities with functionality and public well-being in mind, and today's cities are striving to build on that legacy in ways that balance health, social equity, and environmental responsibility. These modern models of urban living aim to create smarter, healthier, and more sustainable cities that learn from history, but also adapt to the challenges of the 21st century. 1. Green infrastructure and sustainable urban planning. One of the most exciting trends in modern urban planning is the shift toward green infrastructure. In many ways, this is a return to the Roman value of designing cities that incorporate both beauty and functionality. Romans were known for creating gardens, fountains, and green spaces that were integrated into the fabric of their cities, promoting social interaction, relaxation, and clean air. Today, many urban planners are drawing inspiration from this idea, focusing on creating cities that prioritize the environment, while also improving the quality of life for residents. Green infrastructure goes beyond just adding parks and trees to the urban landscape. It also includes eco-friendly systems for managing water, waste, and energy. Urban areas are increasingly adopting rainwater harvesting systems, green roofs, permeable pavements, and natural drainage solutions to reduce stormwater runoff and mitigate flooding. These green systems not only help manage water more efficiently, but also provide spaces for community engagement and biodiversity, much like the Roman baths and public squares that served as places for social interaction. Additionally, the integration of green spaces into cities helps to reduce the urban heat island effect, which occurs when cities become hotter than their rural surroundings due to human activity and the absorption of heat by buildings and streets. By incorporating vegetation and natural elements into the built environment, modern cities can reduce the need for energy-intensive cooling systems and create more pleasant, livable spaces for people. 2. Circular economy and waste management. Another aspect of modern urban living that draws from Roman principles is the rise of the circular economy, a model that emphasizes the reuse, recycling, and repurposing of resources. In Roman times, waste was carefully managed through the use of aqueducts, sewage systems, and communal latrines. The Romans were experts in using water efficiently, and many of their systems helped to prevent waste from accumulating in public spaces. Today, cities are increasingly looking at ways to integrate circular economy principles into waste management, rather than relying solely on linear models where resources are extracted, used, and disposed of. Modern urban planning seeks to create systems where materials and resources are continually reused, repurposed, or recycled. This can include everything from using biodegradable materials in packaging to the recycling of wastewater for reuse in non-potable applications, such as irrigation and industrial processes. The concept of circular economy is closely tied to sustainability, as it aims to reduce environmental impact, conserve resources, and minimize waste. Many modern cities are implementing innovative waste management strategies such as composting, zero waste programs, and urban mining, extracting valuable materials from electronic waste. This approach mirrors the Roman focus on reducing waste in public spaces and using resources efficiently, ensuring that the cycle of consumption doesn't lead to unnecessary environmental degradation. 3. Social equity and accessible sanitation. One of the most important lessons we can take from Roman public health systems is their emphasis on universal access to sanitation. In the Roman Empire, public latrines and bathhouses were open to everyone, regardless of social class, as part of the broader social contract of ensuring public well-being. The Romans understood that sanitation wasn't just an individual concern, but a collective one. Ensuring that all members of society had access to clean water and proper waste disposal was essential to maintaining a healthy, functioning society. In modern cities, the goal of ensuring universal access to sanitation remains just as important. According to the United Nations, over 2 billion people still lack access to basic sanitation facilities, and millions more live without clean drinking water. As cities continue to grow, especially in developing countries, ensuring that sanitation infrastructure is inclusive and accessible to all is a critical challenge. This is where modern urban planning is embracing the principles laid out by the Romans. In many cities, governments and international organizations are working together to provide affordable, sustainable sanitation solutions in informal settlements and underserved areas. Low-cost technologies such as communal toilets, portable sanitation units, and mobile wastewater treatment systems are helping bring clean sanitation to people who would otherwise be excluded from basic services. These innovations help ensure that everyone, regardless of income, has access to essential sanitation and hygiene. Moreover, public health campaigns that focus on hygiene education, proper waste disposal, and water conservation are helping to reduce disease and improve quality of life in urban areas. These efforts echo the Roman approach, where communal spaces like public latrines and bathhouses were integrated into the city to promote hygiene and social equality. 4. Smart cities and technology in sanitation. In today's rapidly evolving world, smart cities are becoming the forefront of urban innovation. These cities integrate cutting-edge technologies with infrastructure to improve efficiency, sustainability, and the overall quality of life for their residents. The principles that guided Roman urban design, such as water management, waste removal, and public health, are being modernized with the help of technologies like the Internet of Things, IoT, data analytics, and artificial intelligence. For example, smart sensors in sewer systems are being used to detect blockages, leaks, or overflow before they become major issues. Waste management systems use real-time data to optimize trash collection routes and schedules, ensuring that waste is picked up more efficiently. In some cities, even the water supply is monitored through sensors that track usage patterns and help prevent water waste. These technologies help create more responsive, adaptable urban environments that are both more efficient and more sustainable. The use of technology in sanitation is also leading to the development of waterless sanitation systems. These systems can reduce the reliance on traditional plumbing, which can be expensive and difficult to implement in certain areas. In places where water is scarce, these waterless toilets and waste treatment systems can provide sanitation without the need for large-scale infrastructure, making them a valuable tool in the global effort to bring clean water and sanitation to underserved populations. 5. The future of public health and urban living. As we continue to build more resilient, sustainable cities, it's essential to remember the Roman commitment to public health and hygiene. Their innovations in sanitation and infrastructure laid the foundation for many of the systems we rely on today. And as we move into the future, we can continue to build on those foundations. From sustainable sanitation systems and green infrastructure to the rise of smart cities, the future of urban living will require a careful balance of technological innovation, environmental responsibility, and social equity. In the years ahead, cities will need to find new ways to meet the demands of growing populations, while ensuring that everyone has access to the resources they need for a healthy life. The Roman legacy of sanitation serves as a reminder that public health, environmental sustainability, and social equity must all work together to create cities that are not only functional, but also equitable and livable for all citizens. As we wrap up our exploration of Roman sanitation and its impact on the future, it's clear that the Roman approach to urban planning and public health offers valuable lessons for modern cities. By learning from the past and continuing to innovate, we can create smarter, more sustainable urban environments that honor the principles of public health and community well-being, just as the Romans did centuries ago. As we move forward into the 21st century, the lessons from ancient Rome continue to inform how we approach challenges in sanitation, public health, and urban living. But as much as we have learned from the past, it's essential to recognize that the future of urban spaces won't simply be a replication of Roman systems. Instead, we must adapt those principles to the specific challenges and opportunities of modern society, incorporating new technologies, shifting values, and the realities of climate change and population growth. The next frontier for cities is not just about adopting old solutions. It's about creating new ones that continue to prioritize sustainability, efficiency, and the well-being of all citizens. 1. The role of climate change in urban sanitation. One of the most pressing challenges modern cities face today is the impact of climate change. Rising sea levels, increasingly frequent and severe storms, and shifting weather patterns have the potential to severely disrupt urban infrastructure, especially sanitation and water management systems. For instance, more intense rainfall events can overwhelm existing stormwater systems, leading to flooding and the contamination of water sources. Similarly, droughts can reduce the availability of fresh water, putting additional stress on already limited resources. In response to these challenges, cities are looking to build more resilient infrastructure, something the Romans would have recognized as crucial to the health of their cities. Their sophisticated water management systems, including aqueducts and sewage channels, were designed with the idea of resilience in mind. Similarly, today's cities are turning to climate resilient infrastructure that anticipates the impacts of changing weather patterns. For example, green or nature-based solutions like permeable pavements, green roofs, and rain gardens are being incorporated into urban design to manage stormwater runoff and reduce flood risks. These systems mimic natural processes and, much like Roman innovations, work in harmony with the environment to keep cities functioning in the face of climate challenges. Furthermore, the emphasis on water conservation is growing. Cities are implementing strategies to reduce water waste through more efficient plumbing systems, rainwater harvesting, and wastewater recycling. These efforts are essential in regions where clean water is scarce and will help future-proof cities by ensuring they can continue to provide for their residents, even as environmental pressures mount. 2. Advanced technology and the future of sanitation. Looking ahead, we can expect technology to play an even larger role in revolutionizing urban sanitation. Just as the Romans innovated with aqueducts, baths, and sewers, we're now entering an era of technological advancements that can take sanitation to new heights, making it more sustainable, efficient, and integrated with our everyday lives. Smart toilets and waste systems. The future of sanitation could very well be shaped by innovations like smart toilets. These devices could monitor personal health, track waste levels, and even recycle water within a single system, reducing the need for external plumbing. In cities where resources are limited, such as in parts of Asia or Africa, smart toilets could help optimize water usage, reducing waste while ensuring proper sanitation. Technologies are also being developed that enable the treatment of waste at the source, without the need for large, centralized systems, reducing the environmental impact of sewage treatment plants. Waste to energy technologies. Another exciting development is the growing use of waste to energy technology. Some modern cities are already experimenting with systems that turn waste into valuable energy, converting human waste into biogas or using waste heat from treatment facilities to generate electricity. These innovations, while still in the early stages in many places, have the potential to not only solve sanitation problems, but also contribute to energy needs, helping cities become more self-sufficient and sustainable in the long term. Robotics and artificial intelligence. Robotics and AI are also becoming increasingly important in waste management. Automated systems are being developed to sort and process waste more efficiently, reducing human labor and improving recycling rates. Some cities are using robots to clean public spaces and waste collection systems, ensuring hygiene standards are met more effectively. AI is also being employed in urban planning to predict water use patterns, anticipate waste treatment needs, and optimize water distribution networks. These advancements in technology promise to enhance the efficiency of sanitation systems, reduce environmental impacts, and improve public health on an even larger scale. But, just as importantly, they also open up new possibilities for making sanitation more equitable and accessible to all. We're entering an era where innovation can make it possible for even the most underserved areas to access modern sanitation services, something the Romans would have appreciated in their own efforts to provide public latrines and baths for all citizens. 3. The importance of education and public health awareness. In addition to infrastructure and technology, we must also remember the importance of education in shaping the future of sanitation and public health. One of the reasons Roman public health systems were so successful was their emphasis on cleanliness as both a public and personal responsibility. Just as Romans created public spaces like bathhouses and latrines to facilitate hygiene, they also understood the importance of public health awareness in preventing disease. Modern cities must continue to educate their citizens about the importance of sanitation, hygiene, and environmental health. Public health campaigns, community workshops, and school programs are all critical in spreading awareness about proper waste management, water conservation, and hygiene practices. In regions with limited access to sanitation, education about safe hygiene practices and waterborne diseases can save countless lives. Empowering people with knowledge about how to improve their own health through hand washing, proper waste disposal, and safe water use remains an essential tool in the fight against preventable diseases. In fact, in many parts of the world, public health education has already made a tremendous difference in improving sanitation standards. Programs that focus on reducing open defecation, promoting sanitation hygiene, and ensuring the safe disposal of waste have been incredibly successful in reducing the spread of diseases like cholera and diarrhea in low-income regions. 4. The Roman legacy, a blueprint for the future. The future of sanitation and urban living is undoubtedly shaped by modern technology, but as we have seen, the Roman legacy plays a crucial role in guiding the path forward. The Romans' innovative approach to water management, waste disposal, public health, and communal spaces was not just functional. It was a cultural philosophy that integrated hygiene into the very fabric of urban life. In many ways, we are revisiting that philosophy today as we seek to create cities that are not only efficient, but also healthy, inclusive, and environmentally sustainable. By learning from the past, we can embrace the best practices and lessons that the Romans left behind, while also adapting them to meet the specific needs and challenges of our time. The future of urban sanitation is not about reinventing the wheel, but about continuing to innovate based on the solid foundation laid by our ancient predecessors. As we look ahead, cities that are built with sustainability, equity, and resilience in mind will be the ones that thrive. These cities will harness the power of technology, environmental stewardship, and public awareness to create clean, safe, and livable spaces for all. The Roman ideal of communal health, public spaces, and innovative infrastructure will continue to serve as a guiding light, showing us how to balance the needs of the present with the demands of the future. Conclusion: moving forward with confidence. In the end, as we strive to address the growing demands of urban populations and the challenges posed by climate change, the lessons of the Roman Empire remain deeply relevant. Their commitment to public health, their pioneering infrastructure, and their focus on social equity offer a blueprint for building cities that are not only functional, but also inclusive, sustainable, and healthy for generations to come. By integrating technology, sustainability, and education, we can create a future that continues to build on the Roman legacy, shaping urban living in ways that promote well-being, equality, and environmental responsibility. As we face the challenges of the future, let's remember that the Romans knew how to build not just cities, but thriving communities. And by drawing on their wisdom, we can continue to build cities that are as resilient, sustainable, and innovative as the ancient world they created.